Welcome to the People Planet Profit podcast. I'm Hayley Jarick, CEO of the Supply Chain Sustainability School, and today I'm joined by Monique Isenheim.
Hi,
Welcome,
Hayley.
Monique.
Great to be here.
So I'm going to jump straight into it because we've got a few questions that we want to get in and ask you. And I think I'll give you some time to be able to answer them as well. But I think the first one is to point out that Monique is one of my bosses, for want of a better word, and she's on the board of the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So my first question is going to be, well, why? Why are you on the board of the school?
Look, sustainability and supply chains really have been a theme of my work life so far. I started with a short stint in corporate procurement, which I really liked. I then added some studies in sustainability management, so that's where the sustainability came in, and specifically looked at sustainable public procurement during that time, which was really very immature at the time and probably still has a long way to go. And then I worked for the Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF, and worked with corporate partnerships on their own supply chains. So, for example, we work with them on forestry products, on seafood, really to make sure that they're aware of the impact of their supply chains and how they can make them really sustainable. So, and now I'm working with the Infrastructure Sustainability Council as head of market development, and there's a lot of crossover between our stakeholders and audiences and the sustainability supply chain school. So it's just really well aligned.
And we're really grateful to have you on the board. I think we've got a really nice working dynamic in our board at the moment of great diversity. The school's setting off in some really good directions. So I'm appreciative for you spending your time to be on the board and contributing to everything that we do. But like, you've got a really diverse background. Like I said, you work at the Infrastructure Sustainability Council, and with all things happening in supply chain, all things happening in infrastructure, and all things happening just everywhere around the world in 2023 of just those macro factors. But the next thing I wanted to ask you was, what are 3 things that people should look out for in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I'm quite following quite closely, both with personal interest and also professionally, is AI, artificial intelligence. And now we've got this situation where it's made pretty accessible to everyone, not just organizations and programmers, but you can open your chat box and you ask AI some questions and then you get some answers. So we can start to see what it's capable of and start using it, and also see what the limitations are. There are probably quite a few risks associated with AI, but I also see lots of opportunities. So, I mean, one is that you can probably see AI as a massive resource to help you crawl lots of data and content and really distill the essence of it. And that's probably going to revolutionize, how we search the internet, how we, find out about sustainable solutions. When we bring it back to what we're working on, that's one thing. And then in terms of infrastructure, which we're working on, it really opens a lot of opportunities in terms of, smart cities, sensing when maintenance is due, managing energy expenditure, and all of those things. And it's really exciting because it'll help with the sustainability journey as well, as if these things can be optimized. So that's certainly one of the things that I'm looking at. The second one is probably investment in energy infrastructure, which is, I think, is really taking up now that we've got the climate targets firmly in place. A lot of potential renewable energy zones have been identified. So I think there's going to be a huge amount of public investment, and that's going to leverage private investment. And that's, it's really exciting. From our perspective, we obviously want to see that infrastructure being built in a very sustainable way, because just because it's renewable energy doesn't necessarily make it sustainable. So that's really important for us, and it's really something I'm looking forward to making a bit of a deep dive in. So that's number 2. And then I guess related to that, you would be very familiar with that. The third trend is probably just an explosion in the demand for capability in terms of all things sustainability. There's labor shortages in a lot of areas, specifically in construction in our area, and then sustainability, which is an interesting challenge. If you started 20 years ago in the sector, you really had to constantly justify your existence and really make sure you get some time on the agenda. And now it seems to be quite the opposite. The organizations can't find enough sustainability professionals. So it also makes me think that it's probably something that will turn from quite a specialist role into a more general skill, like using IT or accounting is part of like the general skill set of somebody working in corporate. For most cases, I think sustainability needs to become pretty mainstream and probably will pretty mainstream, that at least a general understanding as it sort of gets more into the targets of the organizations and what they're doing. So yeah, I think those would be my 3 big things to look out for. And we can help with that, of course, with the last one.
Of course. And it can't be surprising that you would pick 3 things that you're involved in, because that's obviously why I invited you on to ask you those questions. And I think that full disclosure, I used to work for the Infrastructure Sustainability Council many years ago, and a big believer in sustainability rating schemes actually going beyond compliance and pushing the top of the industry to be better at what it does. But for those that aren't familiar with what that means, I mean, you touched on there around renewable energy isn't always sustainable. So what types of things does the IS rating scheme look for when it rates that infrastructure that's different from just saying, well, it must be good because it's renewable?
That's right. Yeah. So basically the scheme looks at the quadruple bottom line: ecological, social, governance, and economic performance. So across those 4 areas, we've got a number of categories, from energy expenditure and waste management, and all of those things that are really closely aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. So, and the scheme certifies projects depending on how well they perform across those categories, and also looks at materiality. And that means that we're really looking at each project individually and looking at, okay, what are the most material factors? When you build a road, it might be very different to when you build an energy transmission type of infrastructure. So we've got the materiality, and then depending on the performance against a certain criteria, the assets get rated and awarded certification levels, and that makes them comparable. So you can actually compare the sustainability of a road with an airport or a water treatment plant once they've gone through that process. So it's pretty wide ranging.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect that I think is not just the topics that it covers, because I think that some people who think sustainability might think or just have one particular aspect of sustainability in mind. So it could be, is it renewable? It could be, is it circular? It could be, is it waste energy? Or very popular, how much carbon emissions would it emit is sort of where most people sort of center to. But I also think that what sets the scheme apart and what's really important to sort of look at in that space too is the stage of the life cycle of the project. So I think that one of the big fans that I'm of the IS rating scheme is that it sets into stages. So when you're planning, you can get the best tools for that. When you're designing it, you can get the best tools for that. When you're constructing it, it's a whole separate set of ratings, and operating it, right? So we get these, we hear a lot, and we've done a few different series of talking to people around, sometimes all of those stages don't necessarily communicate with each other.
That's right. Absolutely, that's right. And the earlier you start, so ideally in the early stage planning stages, the higher the impact, because once something is planned, you already know whether you're building a road or a railway, right? So, and sometimes that's, you're best off to start with, okay, what do we actually want to achieve? We want to get people from A to B. So road is not necessarily always the only option. So if you start really early in the concept stage, the planning stage, that's where you have the biggest impact. Once that is done, there's less impact that you can have in the design. And obviously, if you don't do the design, then in the construction, that all follows through. So yeah, the earlier the better. So we do start from planning.
Yeah. And I also really like the way that your scheme interacts with other schemes. So I think I'm like you, the school's really big on collaboration. And obviously, we work together in a number of different ways between the school and the ISC around how we can then work together in improving sustainability throughout the industry. But I really like the way that the scheme sort of touches on other schemes. So if you're a material manufacturer and you're getting an EPD, that's then recognised within the scheme. It's not like you need to do another competing factor. It's all, let's look at what's best practice out there and integrate it. You produce guides with the Green Building Council of Australia to say, look, if you're getting your whole infrastructure, but there are buildings individually as part of that major project, here's how the two align so that you can work with other building infrastructure. And of course, then in terms of even dealing with suppliers, I really like the way that the I supplier system actually then helps all those people that, sometimes it can feel really overwhelming if you think like billion-dollar infrastructure projects, but all I do is I sell this one little piece, or I have this one little service that is great and it should be used, but it's not the entirety of it, but it can make a massive difference. And then how do you get those innovative things feeding into a lot of these projects so that every teaspoon adds up to be a giant ocean of change in the world as well. So I love the way that the system has evolved and included lots of people through that supply chain as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with the best intentions, sometimes just knowledge is the barrier. And if you're not if you're not aware of what alternatives are out there, for example, cement, there are much more environmentally friendly forms of cement now, but you need to be aware of that. So where we can, we're really keen to help with that as well.
Yeah, I really like the way that it does that. So I suppose then, so tapping on for those are three massive things, right? Like I actually really nerd out around artificial intelligence and the way that can be potentially used as well in the future.
We can probably talk
and
after
not just
this.
from a personal productivity point of view, but just the whole how can it be used for good and not evil? I think exactly. A lot of the every sci-fi movie on earth will tell you how it's going to evolve and be used for evil, but I think that like anything, it's just a tool and it can be used both ways. So how can we tap into that to try and for the betterment of humanity and the earth, which I know sounds really grandiose, but I think there's some massive opportunities in that. But then even touching through on those labor shortages, I don't think people truly appreciate just how dire that is. Like I get hit up a lot on LinkedIn for if I'm interested in a whole stack of different sustainability opportunities, because anybody who knows anything about this space is in hot demand. And if you know a lot about a specific area of it, you're even in higher demand. So I can imagine that the IS accredited professionals is definitely something that's in hot demand, because if you know the ins and outs of the scheme and how to get ratings and the intricacies of that and staying on top of that is just such a massive personal thing that people should be investing in. Especially like you said, there's billions of dollars of infrastructure coming into Australia at the moment. So tapping into all of that and tapping into the success of that's really important. And I did notice that Talent Nation have just put out their 2023 remuneration report. I highly recommend anybody who's thinking about joining the sustainability profession to jump on, donate your $50 and have a look at the report. And then you might want to switch to a field in sustainability and get some training, right? Not that I'm going to tell you what the outcome of that is. I would never steal their thunder, but it's probably worth a look.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And
yeah,
and on the the ISAP accreditation that you can achieve with the ISC, I think when you think about infrastructure sustainability, that can sound like a massive elephant to eat, right? Where do you even start? And I think being certified and knowing how to use the tool, it really breaks it down for you. What are all the areas that you want to look into, and how do you prove that you've improved the performance across them? So it's a really systematic approach and helps to tackle that.
Definitely. So I'm going to bring it back to you for the last question, and sort of really think about, you've had a massive journey and worked at a lot of really influential places and come to a really point now where I really value your expertise and the types of information that you have access to and the networks that you have access to. And so with all of that, what would you tell your younger self? Like, what's one thing that you wish your younger self knew?
Um, Speaking of expertise, I guess, I think there's a big difference between knowledge and wisdom. And you can acquire knowledge pretty fast. You just have to put in some hard work, obviously, and time. But wisdom is really acquired through a journey. And as a young person, you don't necessarily know what the distinction is. And you think because you learn stuff, you know it all. But really, it's the lived experience that that really creates this, you know, I don't want to say I'm wise, but I'm certainly wiser than I was when I started working. So I think that's a very exciting thing. Yeah, looking forward, what where it leads me. So yeah, I would say that's yeah, wisdom is earned through experience, and knowledge is a little bit easier to achieve, I would say.
That's an amazing thing. I really like that quote that you used too, that like wisdom is acquired through a journey. And it's kind of, it is a quest. Life is just one big amazing quest. And the more adventures you take, the more wisdom you'll gain along that journey.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
So I think some of the hardest things that I've ever lived through have given me the most wisdom. And I wouldn't exchange them for anything because of the wisdom that I've earned from that journey. So I think you're spot on with that one. And I think if that's not the quote of the day, I don't know what is.
I recognize when you're 20 and you hear this stuff from older people, that you don't necessarily feel like that's any valuable advice, but coming that along that path, it does make you change and appreciate that. Yeah.
Definitely. I don't think I would have listened to it either. I would have heard it and gone, sure, that's just something old people say so they can try and get up on the younger people.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm like, no, but seriously. I do remember writing as part of a uni assignment at some point, like a personal development plan for emotional intelligence. And I remember I actually went back and looked at it the other day and I said, oh, well, what are you going to do to gain more emotional intelligence? I said, well, I need to get older. And and what are your barriers to doing that? Like nothing really. I've just got to live. That's me again in 5 years' time.
That's the only answer, really. Yeah, probably.
Yeah. It's like go out there, try, fail, learn, move on. It's just fun. But yeah, no, I think it's really fun to be able to tap into that, and that's something you can never tell. Well, I don't think you can't really appreciate it until you've lived it. So I'm going to call it quits on the conversation. Otherwise, we will just talk all day, and we've got plenty of other things that we need to do. And there's definitely time to bring Monique back and talk about a lot of other topics in the future, especially with her incredible wisdom that she can share with everybody as they're coming through. So, Monique, thank you very much for joining me today.
Oh, very welcome. And looking forward to nerding out outside of this on AI.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the People Planet Profit podcast. Until our next episode, goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.